Hi everyone, welcome back to the channel. This time we will go over the module number 7, which is basically functions. Whether you are just starting or you want to write smarter code, this is the right tutorial that you need, because functions are one of the most powerful things that you can learn in programming, in basically any programming language. So if you understand the fundamentals, you should and will be able to apply this in any other languages as well. So let's cover them. Okay, so we have to start with the first and most important things. What is a function? So basically a function is a block of code that only runs when you call it. It lets you group related actions together and run them as many times as you like without rewriting the code actually. Think of it like a recipe. You write it once and cook with it every single time, every time you want. The recipe remains the same. So let's go over one example, because functions usually are defined using this keyword called def. After that, you have to give a name to your function, and this name cannot have spaces like greet me or something. You cannot do this. Instead, if you remember, we can use underscore if you want space, but we will go with greet, simple. And then we have to do the parentheses, because in here later on you will see that we might have some parameters in these functions, but for now I will leave it without parameters. And after this, the syntax must end with double quote. And in here you have to define the block of code that you want to be executed whenever you call this function. So in my case, I want, for example, to print hello Bogdan, because this is the greet function, right? And whenever I run this, it will be printing hello Bogdan. Now, the thing is that here we just define a function without calling it actually, right? But now we have to call it. So how do you call a function? Well, it's pretty simple. You just call its name, because that's how it's called, calling. So you call the name of the function, and after that you just use the parentheses. Again, because we don't have any argument in here, we will not have any argument when we call it. Now, if I'm running this file, sorry, I misspelled. You can see that it says hello Bogdan, right? Because this is how I defined. And if I want to run this particular print multiple times, you will see that if I'm running this again, it will print hello Bogdan multiple times, because that's how it goes, right? You can use this block of code multiple times just by calling this function name. You no longer have to print that again. Now, for this print particularly, it's not that useful, but imagine you have a bunch of code in here and you have to execute that again. Let's say you have a code that extracts some information from the database, right? And you don't want to write that every single time, but instead you create a function and use that function whenever you need to extract anything from the database. Going further to the second thing that I want to emphasize is actually the function's arguments. Because if you remember, when we created this function, I said that the parentheses will remain empty just because we don't have any argument. But now if I want to have a personalized grid, for example, it should say hello to whoever I want, not only to Bogdan. And what I can do is send an argument in here telling the function that, hey, at some point I'm going to use this name. Now this name, what I'm going to do is use it in my function, in my code, block code, and use it like this. As you can see, this basically is this one, and I'm using it to attach it to my hello string. Now, if I'm going to call this again, for example, greet, and that's it, it won't work because it's saying argument missing for parameter name. So what I have to do is actually give it a name, give it a parameter for that argument, right? So if I want to say Bogdan here, this basically will remain unchanged because this is still going to print hello Bogdan. But if I want to print multiple names, like instead of Bogdan, I want to print Larissa, or I want to print, I don't know, John, or any other name, right? And what I'm going to do is going to run this function, and as you can see, it's going to print these names. Now, what I did here is basically using this argument to avoid editing the function every time I want to have this running. Or whenever you want, for example, let's say you have a function that extracts the data from a PDF file, right? And this function has to receive the PDF path as an argument, because otherwise you will have to hard code it and you will get the same PDF every single time, and that's not going to work. So yeah, this is basically the argument. It can go like this, but it can also have multiple arguments, and I will be covering this right now. Let's create a completely new one. Let's create a function that adds to numbers. Let's say a and b, right? And what we can do is use print a plus b. Now, as you can see, this is going to add the following two numbers. But right now, for the numbers, I'm using the arguments. So whenever I'm going to call this function, I have to give the numbers that I want to add. And if I'm running this now, as you can see, I get 10, right? Because I gave these numbers. And these basically are multiple arguments, and we can use them to give different parameters. For example, this one works as well. Now, one thing that I didn't cover yet, and it is very, very important, is that right now we are printing things. And printing is not going to help the tool or the program or the code that you are writing in. Every single function must have return as the ending of the function. What this return does is basically it's ending the function and it's returning wherever you want to return. So in this case would be return a plus b. My keyboard is out of battery, I think, because it's not working properly. Okay, so if I'm running this, as you can see, I don't get anything, because what this function does, it's actually returning the value. But if I want to print it, I have now to print this value right here, because how this works is basically this is equal to this, because this is returning things. So exactly this is going to be printed. If I'm going to run this again, you can see that it's working just fine. So now you can see that the return is actually the correct way of ending a function. Because if I'm trying to print after this return, as you can see, it says code is unreachable, because after the return, the function ends. So I cannot add anything else into the function. Okay. And yeah, we also have, for example, default arguments. If I want, for example, to create a function that says grid once again, and I want to have name, but it's optional basically. And if I don't want to force the user to add a name, I can just simply give it a default value like this one. And what I can do now is print hello and the name. Now, what this does, you can see that if I'm calling this function right now, you will see that it says hello guest, because this is the default value of this parameter. And as you can see, I'm not getting any error now for missing the argument. It's just simply getting this guest. But if I call it like Bodan here, you will see that it will overwrite the default value, obviously, right? One important thing here is, like, when you have multiple arguments, for example, name, let's get rid of the default documents, and age, hello name, let me restructure this string and let me make it formatted string. Okay, and I do name. I know you are age years old. And then right now we have two parameters. We have name and age, which we pass in the formatted string. Now, if I want to call this function and give the parameters by hand, because I have to give them, you will see that these parameters right here are in order. So if I type here Bodan, and in here it's age, which will be 25 or something, right? I'm going to paste this, to print this, and you will see that it says hello Bodan, I know you are 25 years old. But if I don't give the right order of the arguments, which let's say is this one, you will see that this is not going to work as expected, because I mean maybe as expected but not as we want to, because it's hello 25, I know you are Bodan years old, which is not that cool, right? And if we have multiple parameters, arguments, maybe you are asking, how do I know how this order it or whatever? Because there are also arguments which are called named keyword arguments. And in here, I can give, for example, the name of the argument which I want to pass, and then the value. So you can see here now, even if I use 25 as the first parameter and Bogdan as the second parameter, you will see that because I gave the name of the parameter that I'm using a value, you will see that it will print as we want it to be printed. Hello, Bogdan, I know you are 25 years old. This is basically the keywords, the named or keywords arguments that we can use. We can also return multiple values. Like, for example, in this case, if I want to return age and name, in this case, I will use return name and age. And if I want to print this, you will see that the way this is going to be printed, it's actually a tuple. Let's go over this. As you can see, this is a tuple. And what I can do now is, for example, name and age, it's equal to greet, right? And in this greet, I have to pass Bogdan and 25. And in this case, if I'm now going to print and an A without printing this one right here, you will see that this is going to print Bogdan 25. And now n, it's equal to Bogdan, and A, it's equal to 25. If you remember from the previous lectures, we learned about unpacking, because this is a tuple and we unpack it like this. Another cool thing that we can do with functions is that we can create our own module. Let's see how this works. So if I create this, which I will call my math.py, and in here I'm going to add two functions, for example, add, which is going to be like this, and we'll return a plus b, right? And right below this, we go and do a subtract as well, which is a and b, and we go like return a minus b. So we have created two functions in my math file. Now this means in this particular file, we have two functions. Now in my main file, what I can do is import my math, which is going to import this file right here. And from my math, I can now print my math dot add. As you can see, oh, my name, yeah, I misspelled this. But as you can see, now I can do add, and in here I'm going to pass two values. I can do the same thing for my math dot subtract. As you can see, 5 and 3. What I did here is basically using the functions inside this module, how we called it, and using them by importing the file name and then using the functions of that file. If I'm going to print this now, as you can see, 5 plus 3, it's equal to 8, and 5 minus 3 will be equal to 2. So this is how you basically create your own module, which is pretty cool, right? Okay, and I think the last thing that I might be able to cover, which is a little bit more advanced, is Python allows you to create anonymous functions using Lambda. It's great for short and simple tasks. Let's give it an example. So square is basically equal to lambda, and the syntax is x, which is basically the name of the variable that we want to give, from x multiplied by x. This is basically using this lambda function, we created a function that squares the number. So now if I print square of 4, you will see that the output of this will be basically 16, because I'm using this lambda function, which is a very short function, which what it does for this x is going to multiply x by x. So it's going to be 4 times 4, which is obviously 16. All right, so as a quick recap, functions help you write clean and reusable code, right? You can use arguments, you have to return values, and even you can use default for the arguments, or if you want to make sure you don't um, miss any argument, you can also name the arguments. You can group your functions in a module, and you can also use Python built-in functions inside your function. You can do some practice. You can do some practice. I can even give you some examples. You can create a function that calculates your BMI. You can create a function that checks if a number is even or odd. You can create a module with at least 3 math-related functions, and you can import them to use in your main file. Thanks again for watching, and if you learned something today, don't forget to drop a like, subscribe to the channel to be the first one who sees the next tutorial, and if you have any recommendation for the channel, please write that down in the comment section. We will see you next time. Bye.